Well, good morning. Well, this is a first for me. Maybe the last. Time will tell. But I appreciate you being here. It's a beautiful Sabbath that Christ has given us. And what a powerful name it is, isn't it? The name of Jesus Christ. Just want to ask for his presence here this morning. Bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we're just so appreciative of the Sabbath, the time to be able to come together and worship you. And we just lift our hearts and minds to you today. And I pray that the impression you put on my heart, the message that you want portrayed today comes across. So be with us as we continue on in this service and the rest of the Sabbath. In thy name, amen. See if this works. Other way. There we go. Eyes are fascinating and complex organs of the body. They provide one of our 5 basic senses, and they play a pivotal role in our communicating with the world around us. There's many popular sayings about the eyes. When something happens quickly, what do we say? Happens in the blink of an eye, right? And kids are always confounded how a parent knows what they're doing. They must have eyes where? In the back of their head. You're exactly right. And eyes are often expressed as the windows to the soul for how they allow what's inside of us to be shared. And if you've ever had a traumatic event in your life, what do you say happens? Your life passes right before your very eyes. I want to talk about a few interesting facts about the human eye. And I know there's a number of medical professionals in here this morning, so, just trust me, I got these off the internet, so they must be true. But your eyes begin to develop about 2 weeks after conception. Just 2 weeks into your development. And while other facial features will continue to grow over time, your eyes pretty much stay the same size as they were at birth. Your eyes are the fastest muscle in your body and can function at 100% at any given moment, unlike the rest of you. As I know, if you're anything like me, sometimes it takes a little while to get warmed up, right? But you blink an average of 15,000 times in a day, roughly 5.5 million times in a year, and each blink lasts approximately a third of a second. The cornea is the only tissue in your body that doesn't have blood vessels, yet it's still some of the fastest healing tissue you have. And you actually see with your brain, not your eyes. Your eyes simply function as a camera lens, soaking in the light and data and sending it on to your brain. And that image portrayed on the back of your retina is actually upside down. It's your brain that turns it right side up. And under the right conditions, you can see the light of one candle from over 14 miles away. About half of your brain is involved with vision and seeing. And about 80% of our memories are determined by what we saw. Needless to say, there's a very direct connection between our eyes and what we look at in our brain. The eyes are one of the first things you notice about someone when you meet, and making eye contact is the best way of connecting with someone. What did your parents tell you when you meet somebody to do? Look them straight in the eye and give them a firm handshake, right? Make that connection. Eyes are very expressive and help convey a person's emotions. Let's take a look at a few portraits. How many of you remember this picture? Famous picture. Was on the cover of National Geographic in 1985. Stephen McCurry took the photo in Afghanistan. A little 12-year-old orphan Afghan girl was in the camp that he saw. What do her eyes tell you? A little fear, a little uncertainty. Who are you? Why are you taking my picture? Another one of Stephen McCurry's portraits for National Geographic. Older gentleman who has been through an awful lot in his life, yet he has a sense of contentment that shows through. Yet there's still some concern in his eyes as well. Teenage girl, beautiful red hair, steely, penetrating blue eyes. Teenagers have a way of being able to stare at you. I know if you're past your teen years, you probably never did that to your parents, did you? But eyes that penetrate go right through you. What is this World War II's vets? What do his eyes tell you? The horrors of war that he has seen, that he'll never be able to erase. And then there's Marty Feldman. Not quite sure what his eyes are telling me. But he's got that old one eye pointing north and one eye pointing south routine going on here. Maybe he's a little crazy, but boy, what a tremendous character actor and way of being able to portray. You know who this is? Famous actress in the 40s, 50s, regarded as one of the top actresses of all time, known for her eyes, Bette Davis. Women long to have Bette Davis eyes. And one of my favorite guys, Paul Newman, the epitome of cool confidence, known for his baby blues. And speaking of baby blues, how can you not be amazed by the eyes of a child, a newborn, as they become aware of their surroundings and the wonderment of what's going on around them and trying to soak it all in? Well, there's many references in the Bible to eyes. I want to take a look at a few. First one is found in Genesis. It takes place in the Garden of Eden, between the serpent and Eve, there at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Satan, through the serpent, tells Eve, "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good from evil." And the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom. She took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. The original temptation, the original sin, had very much a visual component. The serpent promised that Eve's eyes would be opened, another one of those expressions that we still use today. And her eyes and Adam's eyes were open, just not in the way they expected. But I want you to pay attention to that pleasing to the eye aspect. Satan knew that he had to make it pleasing to the eye if he was going to reel Eve in. Not much has changed, has it? Most of our temptations, most of our challenges are with things that are pleasing to the eye. Last week, we, in the adult lesson, talked about the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, which is the only commandment that deals with thought, and that thought aspect begins with what you fixate on with your eyes. And they summarized that lesson with, I see, I want, and I take, something that doesn't belong to me. But many of the sins that Paul talks about as sins of the flesh, whether it be lust or adultery, greed or envy, stealing, many of the things that we are subjected to have a strong visual component. Advertisers are great at selling their product to you, and they've learned well how to make it pleasing to the eye. And we'd be wise to pay heed to that aspect. The next verse, Christ in the Sermon on the Mount. Oh. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. In the Sermon on the Mount, when he's talking about adultery, where he's saying, even if you look lustfully at a woman in your heart, you've committed the sin of adultery. He says this, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out, throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Well, that's a rather strong statement, isn't it? Is he really promoting self-mutilation here? What is Christ trying to tell us? He's talking about that connection between our eyes and what we look at in our spiritual health. And I think he's encouraging us to guard the avenues of our soul, sight being one of them. Further on in the Sermon on the Mount, when Christ is talking about where to store your treasures and store them up in heaven instead of on this earth, he said this, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. Again, coming on the heels of a discussion of where to focus and store your treasures, he's talking about the eyes as being the lamp of the body. When they're healthy, you're full of light. But when they're unhealthy, you're full of darkness. Focus on the eternal things, the things that are going to build you towards eternity. David says amongst Psalms 119, turn my eyes away from worthless things and preserve my life according to your word. Again, David, somebody who learned very well the lesson of what you should or should not be fixating your gaze on, pleads, turn my eyes away from worthless things. And Solomon, there we go. Solomon, in the book of Proverbs, gives us some great advice. Let your eyes look straight ahead and fix your gaze directly before you. You've heard of the term wandering eye. Well, a wandering eye will oftentimes get you in trouble, and Solomon is advising us to keep our eyes firmly focused straight ahead. So needless to say, scriptural evidence certainly supports the connection between what we see and what we look at and our spiritual health. And while Solomon's advice has a lot of spiritual applications, it also has a lot of practical advice. I grew up riding and racing motorcycles most of my life, and in all types of terrain, from the Southern California desert to the forests of Northern California. And one of the things you're taught when you begin to ride and advance, what you want to do is you want to pick a line and focus on that line. Focus on where you want to go, because it's proven that your body will follow where your eyes are focused. Don't look at the rut. Don't look at the rock. Don't look at the tree. Because if you look at those, what's going to happen? You're going to hit them. As soon as you divert your attention to what you don't want to hit, you're going to hit it. And I can stand here today and tell you I've tested that out many a times. And it's true. But you watch race car drivers, and what do? Lap after lap, they hit the exact same point on the corner and down the straightaway, and lap after lap, they are so focused on the line of where they want to go. They don't care what's off to the side. Many of them will even tape their visor to get rid of peripheral vision. Emphasize where your focus needs to be. Well, there's a fascinating story in the Bible that illustrates how important it is to what our eyes are focused on. So I'd like for you to come back with me a couple thousand years to an incredible event on the Sea of Galilee. Three of the four Gospels record this story: Matthew, Mark, and John. Each includes some unique details that the others didn't, but only Matthew records Peter's experience of walking on the water. I personally think this has got to be one of the most defining moments in Peter's life, an experience that only he has ever had. And I think it helped shape him into becoming the powerful apostle that he became later, and taught him a lot of other things as well. When I take these stories, I like to put them in some context. And so I want to step back a little bit and back up a little bit and talk about what was happening. So these stories are found in Matthew 14, Mark 6, and John 6, and I'm going to primarily focus on Matthew 14. But Christ had recently been told about the beheading of John the Baptist. And obviously distraught and wanting to be alone, he gets in a boat with his disciples and they head off down the shore looking for a solitary place to land. Well, they find a place, but word traveled quick. And before long, a large crowd of people had gathered around them along the shoreline. And Christ, having compassion for them, had them sit down on the hillside and started to teach them and heal their sick. And spent the bulk of the day with them. And as the day grew long and evening was approaching, the miraculous feeding of the 5,000 men plus all of the women and children took place. So quite a day, awesome day. And there was an energy building within the crowd. Wow, this truly could be our king. Somebody who will solve this problem of Roman oppression and reassert the dominance of the Jewish people. And look what he could do and how he could help us. He can feed us. We go into battle, he can heal those who have been wounded. The only problem is he shows no interest at all in fulfilling that role. So there's a movement amongst the crowd, and the disciples are actually stepping into that discussion as well. And it's, if he doesn't want to do it on his own, we'll take him by force and we'll make him our king. Well, Jesus, knowing what's going on, in a commanding voice that only he could carry off, tells the crowd it's time to go home. And he looks at his disciples and he tells them, you need to head down to the shore and get in your boat and head across the lake, and I'll catch up with you later. And as the disillusioned and disappointed crowd disperses and the disciples head down to the shore, Christ heads up the mountain to pray. And he prays for the people. He prays that they will understand that he didn't come here to solve their earthly kingdom problems. And he prays for his disciples that soon their faith is going to be tested unlike they could ever imagine. And he prays that they will have the strength to be able to get through it. For Christ knows that his time is short in his ministry. The Passover is coming. Well, the disciples make their way down and they're wondering, what just happened? What a great day. And now Christ just is sending us away? And how's he going to get across the lake if we go over there? He said he's going to catch up with us later. But they went about obeying his command, and they get in their boat and they take off. Well, they get about 3 or 4 miles out into the lake, and a storm blows in and settles in across the lake, and the disciples begin to battle this storm in their boat. And they battle it for hours, and these aren't inexperienced guys. They know how to manage a boat on the lake, and they've been in these storms before. But this one has been giving them particular trouble. And throughout the night they have struggled, and shortly before dawn, what's called the fourth watch, which is roughly 3 to 6 in the morning, they're tired and exhausted and are about to give up. And Christ, who is still on the mountainside and has been watching what has been happening to them, feels it's time to go catch up. So he makes his way down the mountainside and begins to walk across the water out to where they were. Mark says something kind of interesting. He says, Christ was about to pass them up when they noticed him, but they didn't recognize him. When they saw this figure walking out across the water, they were terrified, and they cried out in fear, "This is a ghost." They resorted back to their superstitious beliefs that spirits that appeared during the night brought disaster. And they felt like they were on the edge of a disaster. In their mind, they resorted back to this idea, and they were terrified. But Christ calls out to them. He says, "No, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." Well, then Peter, being the bold one of the bunch, and I admire that about Peter, says, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come out onto the water to meet you." Where'd he come up with that? Is that what you would have asked? I mean, that's a very interesting request if you ask me. Let me walk out there. Let me do something that no human can do. But Christ doesn't chastise him. He simply says, "Come." So now Peter has a decision. Did his mouth just write a check that his body can't cash? Does he step out in faith and do something that is humanly impossible? Or does doubt raise its ugly head and causing him to simply say, "Just kidding, Christ," and he slides back down into the boat next to the rest of the disciples? He's at a crossroads. But he decides to take Christ up on his offer. And with his eyes firmly focused on Christ and solely focused on Christ, not on the wind, not on the waves, not on the lightning, not on the thunder, he takes that first step out of the boat. And he places his foot down and then the other, and he is standing on the surface of the water. Let that sink in for a moment. You ever try that? Every time I get out of my boat on the lake, I don't necessarily stand on the surface. As a kid, I thought, wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't it be great to be able to just run across the pool? Have you tried that? If you get enough speed on the, run across the deck and then just keep running across the pool, maybe you can make it. No. Doesn't work that way. But I took a leap of faith one time that has some parallels that I'd like to share with you. My family was traveling in New Zealand a number of years ago, and we were staying in Queenstown. The absolute adventure capital of the world. There are more ways to gain an adrenaline rush in Queenstown than you can imagine. As for all you adrenaline junkies, you've got to go to Queenstown at least once in your life. And the interesting thing about it is they let you do it. There's no long 15-page liability form signing your life away that you got to do in this country. Lawyers don't get involved. If they figure if you're stupid enough to want to try this, let them. Well, there's a bridge, Kararu Bridge, just outside of Queenstown, which is the birthplace of bungee jumping. So we got in the car and we drive out there, park, and we walk through and head out to the observation deck, perched high on the cliff of this canyon. And it looks across at this beautiful wooden bridge that spans this canyon, big steep walls, beautiful river that flows through it. And one after one, we watch as people work their way to the edge of this platform and jump off, only to be saved right before hitting the water by this, what I would call a rather large rubber band. So we're looking at this and soaking it all in, and we get together and we say, okay, who wants to do this? Well, my oldest son, Kevin, who's probably about 14 at the time, he says, I'm in. Never hesitated. And our younger son, Andrew, who was about 11 at the time, thought about it, and he said, no, you know what? I think I'm going to sit this one out. Which surprised me. I thought he would dive in there too. My wife and I said, sure, let's do it. We signed up. We march out there to the bridge, and we sit down, and they start going over how this is going to work. Who wants to go first? Kevin raises his hand. I will. So he sits down, and he gets strapped into this harness that wraps your ankles very tightly together. And that's attached to this rubber band, if you will. And they tell you, here's how it's going to work. They march him up, push him out to the little platform, 3, 2, 1, poof. Off he went. 150 feet down to the water. And from where I'm sitting, I can't see him. But I'm looking at the response of the crowd on the observation deck, and there were no gasps, so evidently he made it. So I said, okay. They turn and go, who's next? My wife said, hey, I'm up. So they get her all buckled up, hobble her out to the platform. 3, 2, 1, beautiful swan dive off the platform. And I'm trying to see, same thing, does she make it? Evidently so. So the guys turn and look at me and go, okay, Dad, your turn. I said, I guess it is. So they start buckling me up into this harness. And they're talking to you, and one of the things that they're doing is they're looking at your eyes. They're asking you questions. What are they trying to determine? You scared to death, or are we going to have to push you, or you're going to jump on your own? Because they do use different tactics based upon what feedback they get from you, and one of the key pieces of information they get is by looking at your eyes. Well, all these things, are natural things are running through your mind. You're buckled together, and they go, okay, stand up. We're going to work your way over to the platform edge. And you can't walk, you're hopping, you're hobbling, and they're constantly pushing you from behind. It's like, okay, already, I'm going. Just give me a chance. And you go past all of those things that normally give you comfort. The security of the bridge deck, the railings, all the things that in your mind tell you, stay behind. And they keep telling you, go forward. All the time talking to you, assessing your state of mind. When your toes get up to the edge of that platform and they go, okay, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go 3, 2, 1, and you jump. And I'm thinking 3, 2, 1, do I jump on one? Do I 3, 2, 1, then jump? I mean, is that rubber band tied to anything? All these, natural thoughts. You're resorting to those things that you think you can control. But the very nature of the event is to take away your faith in those things that you can control and rely solely on this rubber band that is going to catch you before you hit the water. And they tell you, okay, now I want you to look straight across the canyon. Focus on a point. And when we count down, jump. So I said, okay, 3, 2, 1, and it's now or never. And poof, I jump off into a swan dive. I don't think I was screaming all the way down, but I'm sure my life did pass before my eyes. But what an adrenaline rush. What an experience about placing your faith in something that is beyond your control. Let's get back to Peter. He just stepped out of the boat. He is standing on the water. He is taking steps and walking out across the water. And keep in mind, the storm is still raging. The wind and the waves, the thunder and the lightning, it hasn't gone away. But they are of no longer any consequence to him. For his eyes are solely focused on Christ, and he's got that connection going, and that connection has given him the power to do something that is humanly impossible. But then suddenly something happens. They don't really say what, not sure if it's a bolt of lightning, the crack of thunder, maybe getting hit with a spray of water in his face, or maybe it's a little bit of self-satisfaction, but Peter takes his eyes off of looking at Christ. And he begins to pay more attention again to the storm going on around him. And immediately, his faith turns back to fear. And he begins to sink. Sink under the waves and to be swallowed up by that storm. And just before he goes under, he has time to say one prayer, one quick prayer. Save me! And the Bible says immediately Christ reaches down and catches Peter and pulls him back to the surface. And he says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" He's asking him, why did you let doubt take the place of your faith? That's a question he still asks us today. So together they walk back to the boat, mind you, still on top of the water. And they get back in, and only then did the storm die down. And if you were one of those disciples watching all this take place, how would you interpret that? What did you just see? First Christ walking on the water, and now one of your own, Peter, doing out that, and then he nearly dies. Well, one thing that is clear is they had a response that was unlike the response that they had on the boat in the storm when Christ calmed the storm before. When they said at that point in time, "Who is this man that even the wind and waves obey?" They clearly knew who this man was at this time, for they said, "Truly you are the Son of God." So what can we learn from Peter's experience? Well, take a look around. The world's obviously in strife. Division and hatred, intolerance is on the rise. Christianity is under attack. Faith in God is under attack. The moral foundation of society is dissolving. The family unit is collapsing. Stress and strain is everywhere around us. And on a personal level, we all deal with certain things, storms in different ways, in different shapes and sizes. We can have financial problems. You can lose, maybe you've lost a job or struggling to pay your bills, or wondering if your retirement income is going to be enough to keep you alive. You can have relationship problems, family stress. Maybe you lost a loved one. Health problems. Many people, far too many people, are having problems with their health and fighting cancer and bodies that are breaking down. People struggle with addictions and depression. Maybe somebody has let you down. Maybe there's something going on in this church family that has caused you concern and there's division taking place. But we face those kinds of storm clouds each and every day. And our natural tendency is to want to fight those on our own. We trust our own abilities, our own intellect and strength. We can get through this. I can deal with this. And we build this boat around us, this self-sufficient comfort zone that we want to stay in and stay seated in and fight this storm on our own. But when we struggle, we wonder, well, where's God in all this? What we don't realize is God has been there all the time. We may not have recognized him, but he's been there. And he extends this offer out to us all the time. Come to me. If you're weary and burdened, come to me, and I'll give you peace. I won't necessarily make the storm clouds go away, but I will give you the strength to deal with them, and I'll give you peace in your heart that you need. But you must get out of your boat and trust me. So every day we have this choice to make. Do we focus our eyes on Christ for that day? Do we take him for his word? Do we align ourselves with his will? Do we fill ourselves with his power and strength? Or do we let doubt and fear rule the day? Do we trust in ourselves more than we trust God? And sadly, too many of us choose the comfort of our own boat, just as the other 11 disciples did. And what we need to realize is by focusing on Christ, starting our day that way, and aligning ourselves, we can do things that we never thought we could do on our own. Things that we thought were impossible to do or deal with. Christ will give us that strength. And oftentimes it's easy to pick on Peter in this experience for having a little faith. But how much faith did the other disciples have who stayed in the boat? They never put their faith to the test. Be bold. Be like Peter. I love that text in Hebrews. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Every day's a rat race, isn't it? We are challenged. We are tossed about. But we have a choice to make. I encourage you, in this storm-filled world that we live in, stop trying to fight the battle on your own. Stop letting doubt and fear get in the place of exercising your faith. Don't let your self-sufficiency get in the way of trusting in God each and every day. And with your eyes solely and firmly focused on Christ, my message to you today is it's time to get out of your boat.